Okay, nu! Yay! We had some issues with technology. Thank you for being patient. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good to see so many in the audience. Nice to see those of you online as well. My name is Victor. I work at KTH Innovation. You're welcome to the building that we are happy to host this KTH Africa Days in. Today, we will be talking about research and innovation in resource-complex environments. And I have an excellent panel of people with me here. We're waiting for one more person who will join, but I think let's get going, so to say, and then we'll make sure that the last panelists can join as well. So, the agenda for today is that we will start with a short keynote by Susanne, just to give sort of a description and overview of the concepts that we sort of will be discussing and talking about during the panel. And then we will move over to the panel discussion. And after the panel discussion, we hope to be around sort of like 1 o'clock-ish, and then it will be also an opportunity for all of you to ask questions for the panelists, because we do have sort of a half-hour mingling towards at the end of the session. So, as I said, my name is Victor, and this is part of KTH Africa Days. And this is the first time we're doing this, actually, but we're super excited to have it. I work here, but I'm also part of Global Development Hub, together with some people in the audience and also Susanne here. And the Africa Days is an opportunity to share KTH's vision and strategies for increasing our presence in Africa, showcasing our diverse activities in Africa, including KTH Global Development Hub, to our colleagues, students, and partners. Our primary objective is to inspire and forge connections between our researchers and partner institutions, students, and impactful projects. We've also had the opportunity to address the issue of responsible internationalization from a university perspective. So before we start with the presentation from Susanne, I also just wanted to let you all know, and you might have seen the posters here in the room, we have something called the KTH in Africa community that we are currently actively building. If you are curious to learn more about that, or if you want to engage with this community, feel free to scan the QR codes on the posters around the room to read more, but also register for the future activities that will be happening there. But again, thank you so much everyone for being here, and great to have you here in the panel as well. I'm thinking let's keep, he's coming now, perfect. So what I'm thinking is I will do the introductions after you've done your talk, because then we have everyone on stage and so on. So I will hand over the word to Susanne. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, and also welcome to everyone. I just want to actually introduce this panel discussion today with a discussion that me and Victor had before, because when we were discussing the theme of this seminar, we were really struggling with how the concepts to use, and particularly when it came to the resource. We have termed this seminar being you doing innovation and research in resource complex environments, and that is really not a word or a concept that exists. We have kind of invented it. And why? Yeah, but usually when we talk about innovation for instance, in countries that are defined as low and medium income countries, we tend to talk about doing research in resource scarce environment. But we thought that was kind of too simplistic. So I'm just gonna, based in that, have some introduction here about what we are going to talk about here today. And I would like to start with that, and I think you agree with me, considering when you read and when you are looking into what is actually talked about today, and that is that we have an enormous faith in that innovation is really something that we need to address all those big challenges that we are facing today. And furthermore, entrepreneurs and researchers are more and more seen as key actors for realizing and also coming up with these solutions and implement them. And as these greatest challenges, or the big challenges here, are global in their nature, there is also an understanding that we need to collaborate. And when we collaborate also when it comes to research and innovation. However, is innovation really the answer to address all the big challenges that we are facing? Is that kind of the solution? And not the least because what we know from history is that always when we are inventing something new, we introduce new solutions, they also come with side effects that not always are positive. Today we know that a lot of the technologies and the way we have developed our society in a country, for instance, like Sweden, is really unsustainable. So combined with that, if we question a bit whether innovation is the solution, is it also possible to have a solution or an innovation that you develop somewhere in the world and then transfer it and implement it somewhere else, when you know that the differences between contexts, between settings, between countries or regions are very, very different, both in terms of resources, but the infrastructure and innovation systems, etc. So kind of questioning this is important for us, I think, as a starting point. And also, as I talked about in the beginning there, that it's overly simplistic to just talk about resource differences and talk about resource scarcity or resource abundance when we compare countries and regions, like countries on the African continent and Sweden, for instance. It's more about actually who has access to what resources, and also, not the least, maybe the value of the resources that exist. We know that on the African continent, many of the African countries have vast amount of resources in terms of minerals, materials, that are highly wanted and needed, not the least in the electrification agenda that Sweden and many of the other high-income countries are right now, have high on their national agenda. So, but that doesn't mean that if you have the resources, you can gain the value from them, because that's really not what we see. Rather the opposite sometimes, because if we take this mineral and material, they have kind of led to struggles for the struggles for these resources has really led to enormous devastations and harm for many of large part of the population in the countries that actually have those resources. And in addition to this kind of differences or complexity, is that there is a trend, I think it's the last 15 years or something, it's constant in all cities all over the world. The differences between low income and high income habitants or residents has increased in all cities all over the world. This means that we also have large or huge differences in how it looks like within a city. So we have parts of the city that can be green and lush and have all the transportations or and access to all resources possible. And then parts of the city where people live very crowded, maybe not so lush and green, and might even have lack of basic amenities. And also in countries like ours or other high-income countries, in a city there are a lot of people who are lonely. In UK, I don't know if you know that, they have even a loneliness minister, or a minister of loneliness. While in a lot of parts of the city where you live crowded or have to deal or depend more on your family, you can have really rich and strong social networks, which is an important resource. I think we will come into that when we discuss here. So that's why we call this, we talk about complex, resource complex, not resource scarce environments today. And we welcome to challenge. You can challenge that kind of concept and come up with new ideas. We are happy. But I think also to end here that I would say that those of us who are here today, we kind of believe that innovation and entrepreneurship really can play an important role. And not alone, but in collaboration with different actors, with the structures that we need. But we also know that in order to come up with the innovations that can create meaningful impact, we need to challenge both the academic theories, I would say, and also the practical knowledge on how innovation traditionally has been developed. So, because if you think about what is normally the normal innovation process, it's really about that you have it's originating from high-income countries, and it's based on new and advanced technologies, and it's typically targeting individuals that want this new technology and can afford to do it. So instead, if we look at the other side and think about another process where where the innovation kind of starts from other countries like Africa, and we have the base of our starting point from communities that are and trying to do innovation for many people in communities that today are underserved. And then instead turn those innovation and get them here, or transfer them to our context, where we have an urgent need for solutions to help us out of our unsustainable lives and structures. How would that look like? So I think that's what I would like to kind of introduce here before we start the panel.
Thank you, Susanne. Great. So I will give an introduction to the panelists now, so you all know who everyone is on stage. So we have Susanne. You jumped into your topic, but I didn't really introduce you. So you are a researcher at KTH. You are in the field of integrated product development and design. And more recently, you've looked a lot at, for example, frugal innovation and talking about social entrepreneurship and these sort of more, alternative ways of building businesses and innovation. But you also have a long experience, of course, from the industry and of working with mainly medtech devices, as I understood it, but still from like the R&D sort of side as well. So great to have you here. And then we have Aman Osson, who is a professor here at KTH and also a serial entrepreneur. Well, actually, you have a startup with us as well, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But Aman, I think, is leading the points here on stage. So you've built several different spin-offs and sort of like research entrepreneurship related things with us, and the most recent one was Cell to Bio, which is still active, and I mean several of them are, but super good to have you here. And your background in terms of research is nanobiotechnology. Yes. And then we have Jenny Jenström, who is the acting manager of Help to Help, which is a startup that started here at KTH Innovation, with help from KTH Innovation many years ago. And the founder, who is still active in the team, is not here today, but you are here instead, which we're very happy for. But you also have a background in NGOs and working with youth leadership in Africa and sort of looking at thought leaders for the continent. So great to have you here as well. And then we have John Black-Kabuke from Stockholm University, but also Digital Futures, which is connected here at KTH as well. Medical doctor, postdoc researcher, working within design, implementation, and evaluation of digital health tools, which are specifically targeting, appropriate for low resource settings, as you defined it, which is mainly, for example, in cancer and other non-communicable diseases. So great to have you all here. Thank you for taking the time. I wanted to just sort of like get going, and I'm thinking we'll start with Jenny. And so if you would look at the topic of today and sort of like building on your own experience, where do you think the thoughts about, sorry, I'm going to make sure I read the question for everyone here, the environment in which these innovations and research happens? You know, what is your experience of looking at what is maybe interesting or relevant or, you know, standing out in sort of like looking at the environment and where these things happen?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's super nice being here. I haven't been a KTH student myself, like you said, but Help to Help's founder, Malin Kronqvist, she's a KTH alumni, and I'm so proud to see our logo over there, because this was actually where Help to Help was born back in the day, and part of the KTH innovation and the incubator program. So this environment has been really important for our journey. Just for background, Help to Help is a non-profit foundation enabling higher education for youth in Tanzania and Uganda. So young people who cannot afford to go to university, they can apply to our scholarship program and then get the opportunity to study at local universities in Tanzania and Uganda. So it all actually began here when Malin got to know fellow students. She started talking about this idea, like how to help young people it started in Tanzania because she had been traveling there and got to know many young, ambitious students who never made it to university. So as she started talking about the idea here, more and more joined, and at some point I think there were like 10 students engaged in Help to Help somehow, you know, some with IT, some with finance, etc. So it has really been a fundamental part of where we are today. So I think this environment has been key in our journey, definitely.
And building on that, also looking at your experience, John Black. So when we talk about building these impactful solutions and implementing them, what is your sort of experience and insight when it comes to the environment in which these things happen?
Yeah, so I think the environment plays a very crucial role. If I look at it from the area of digital health, which I work with, we tend to have a lot of rapid progress in digital innovations. There's, you know, computers and their capacity doubling every, I don't remember Moa's law, I think it was 18 months, but now it is much less than that. And so there's a lot of innovations. And then what happens is that then people come with these tools and they want to sort of implement them. So they have hammers and they're looking for nails to hit. And this happens a lot because you have all these developments in the US and most, you know, Europe and global north. And then people think, oh, we should go and take them in Africa, we should take them in Asia or whatever. And then the problem is that, you know, there is a mismatch in the maturity of the technology, but even the experiences of the target users. And that mismatch makes it hard for the innovation to take root. Because people need the skills, they need to have tech support in case, you know, they have to troubleshoot things. But even just getting used, so there's a bit of inertia. You know, if you haven't used a tool before, you have to learn to use it. You have to get over your comfort zone and get into, oh, now we have, let's say, electronic medical record systems. We have my medical history in a computer system and who has access to it and all this. So the environment where a person is really influences whether technology, which might have been proven to work elsewhere, whether it will take root, and all the challenges that can come with it. And sometimes you need help from, I don't know, researchers and policymakers to guide the progress. And I think we've seen this with, for example, GDPR. It sort of was assumed that people will know what to do and they will click the right boxes and they consent, and people don't do that. And then we have to have a policy coming in to say, we're holding the innovators accountable to actually protect people's data. And this concept also applies to really everything, whether it is, you know, training, whether it is, you know, building solutions that are going to help patients in a remote village somewhere. The environment is really critical in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is touching a lot on sort of these general effects and factors that might sort of feed into these different opportunities and situations. So from your experience, Aman, is there something you would like to either comment on or add in the discussion?
Yeah, I think like John Black was saying about this hammer and needle, I'm quite familiar with that. For the last 20 years, maybe within research, we try to do beyond the state of the art. So you look for a problem that doesn't exist, because that's how we solve it, and then we publish. So in our field, we call it publish or perish. So which means we try to innovate on innovation, but then we forget about the end users and who is actually going to implement it. So we've been learning the past 20 years maybe that, okay, in order for an innovation to make an impact, you need to work with people from different fields, different sets of skills, and not to forget the involvement of the community that's going to be ending up using. As an analogy, maybe I can say that if you think about point-of-care diagnostics, many, up to 75% of diagnostics that has been developed in the, let's say, a global north, never end up being applied in a resource-limiting settings. And that context really is a devastating, which means something that normally technology-wise should work fine, never end up being used for those that would really need it. So really a little bit about what John Black was saying, I can reiterate and echo on that one, that you really need to capture the diversity of who is the end user, what's their condition, what's their situation. And now maybe I will touch upon it a little bit later, but also in the European Commission project, we try to have implementation of co-creation. So that you need to have the end users from day zero, so that whenever you're developing something, you have constant dialogue and discussion with who is the end user. So that really would echo a little bit with what John Black was saying.
Susanne, do you want to add something?
Yes, but I think it's really interesting to listen to you. I have been following 12 entrepreneurs that are operating in a township in Cape Town for 4 years, and they are all high-tech social innovators. And they come both from the outside. Some of them come from the outside of the township is an urban slum area, so to speak, in a big city. So some of them come from the outside and some from the inside. It's really interesting to see how much time they need to spend and how much time they do spend. Not everyone, and not everyone succeed either, but they are really really engaging with the context in that sense, both with the people, with the targeted people, and trying to work together, but also to understand the spatial dimension and also the institutional, which may not always be institutional in our sense, but there are other structures that you need to, understand how to collaborate with in order to get things going. So I fully agree. And it's also, I can just mention, even those entrepreneurs who come from the inside, so to speak, who are or grown up in these areas, they also, of course, struggle, also because technology, you could be interested in technology, and then it still is, is the technology solving the problem, or, is it really something else we need right now? So, thanks.
So I'm curious, Jenny, if you don't mind. So for you, obviously, your idea is sort of built and started here in Stockholm, but your active markets then are in Tanzania and Uganda, if we can call them markets in that sense. But in an entrepreneurial set, that's usually the word you would use, right? So, I mean, if we talk about these sort of, differences or like challenges and sort of like, comparing sort of starting here, but implementing it to a large degree somewhere else. I know you have a local office as well, but, so what has your experience been there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And yes, we have one office here in Stockholm at Norrsken House, which is also this sort of thriving, energizing, innovative environment. And then one office in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So we have staff, we have a team in both places, but we really try to we are one team, and we really try to get a working culture with the best of both, like the best from Sweden, the best from East Africa. So I think it gives a good and dynamic working environment, and for us it has been a success, I would say, the culture. So in order to, here in Sweden we have contact with our donors, our partners, and most of the fundraising happens here, whereas my colleagues in East Africa, of course, they have they have contact to the partner universities and the students and all that. So we really work together in that sense. So yeah, it's really rewarding.
And so, again, coming back a bit to everyone of your sort of your own experience and running your projects and so on, is there something that you feel like you would like to add and sort of comment on when we're talking about this sort of environment that we're operating in, but perhaps also the obstacles or the challenges or the opportunities that we need to think about or consider? Because, of course, we want everyone to get inspired also to address these things on their own.
I can start. So I think innovation in healthcare is a bit tricky. It's literally a matter of life and death in some situations. And I would say that healthcare tends to be very guarded in a way. So you have to really prove that something works. I tend to think that in other areas, the end justifies the means. So if it works, nobody asks you why, they just take it up. But in healthcare, even if it works, we always ask you how and why, and because we need to sort of replicate and we need to explain and we need to be really sure that this is working and we don't put patients at risk. So that's something that you have to remember, and you always have to get evidence, and you have to collect data, and you have to run trials, or do all these lengthy things, and sometimes this is a problem because maybe funders and donors are not patient enough. They give you seed grants for 6 months and they want to get results, and I think that doesn't work. So that's something that should be remembered, that if you're going to bring a product in healthcare, you have to be patient and you have to collect this data over time. And of course, I will have to iterate the importance of understanding the context, and this can only be understood through user-centered design methods. You have to be empathetic, you have to understand the context where people work. If you can have them actually do the actual work and they can lead, because that's also important in terms of getting buy-in, because you wonder, even if it works, sometimes people just don't use it because they're not familiar with it. So if you can have partners and collaborators and researchers and even patients get involved in designing solutions, not only do you get solutions that are appropriate and usable for them, but you also have this relationship, and it is important for buy-in, because so many times tools are developed and they are piloted and they stop when the funding ends. We actually have a term for this, pilotitis. If you're familiar in healthcare, itis tends to mean inflammation and something going wrong, and we've added this to pilots to make it a real disease that we are facing. So we don't want to have that, and the way to avoid pilotitis is really to have user-centered design, to have end users involved, and to have multiple stakeholders and understanding their where they're coming from. And if you are going to have KTH in Africa, then that will call for meaningful collaborations where there is really input from the partners on the other side. So that's a bit of the summary.
Thank you. Someone, yeah?
Maybe I can build on it again. We seem to be very nice complimenting each other. Thank you for arranging this. So maybe I can say something that I'm now into my maybe 9th or 10th EU project. We end up doing a prototype, and then that prototype dies when the funding ends. So you never pass that for many, many years. So now we've been learning a lot around that. So currently I'm coordinating an EU project. It's called Holy Care, where my colleague here is also a partner of it. Both KTH, Stockholm University and Karolinska are part of it as well. This is EU Sub-Saharan African collaboration. And this Holy Care, we look at it from a holistic approach in terms of massive uptaking of an innovative technologies for diagnostics. So what has been happening in the past couple of decades is that you develop something, you do a proof of principle at the maximum, and then that funding ends. So here the idea is to have, we call it 4-pillar approach, where we actually have capacity building equally as important as developing a diagnostic test. So in parallel, we're developing a test for respiratory diseases, but most important is that capacity building means that we give workshops, education, etc. upfront, and then we have the end user develop the methods together with us. So we don't differentiate who is the end user, who is the tech developer here, but we just co-develop things together. And another thing that was important learning is that research is important in terms of Sub-Saharan African context. So the idea is to have something where they can do the research themselves following this project. So adaptation means, in our context, local manufacturing, end user defined clinical questions. So that's really where we are heading right now, is that I really, yesterday we had this seminar by Anders Rosén, who was saying that KTH got inspired to start something from our partner universities. And here is this where we see the synergies. When you start to interact in terms of partnership, equal partnership, you actually get to learn from each other and develop something that actually has a better chance of being implemented and used locally. Some of the problems when you talk into biotech and the medical arena is that we have this concept that it has to work 99.9% of the time, very high efficiency. We call it specificity and sensitivity. The problem is that might work in a certain context, but in other contexts, maybe 70% is good enough, which means if you're looking into screening a population, a lateral flow assay-based method that has only 70% might give you a good advantage for screening purposes. And then once you've done the screening, you'd follow up in selective fewer with a bit more advanced technologies. So I think we have to look at it from a holistic approach where certain technologies are good enough for a certain aspect, while others has to be 99.9 because a clinical decision making depends on it. So there are some of those that we're learning now that certain level of compromise are okay. And this is a little bit touching upon the frugal innovation, where you can really look at things that were purpose for something else. You can maybe modify it very small, compromise on efficiency, but gain a lot in terms of population studies. So really, a little bit, this is what I would like to add on what you said.
If I could just reflect on this, I think in general, because of the technology that is there, we've become so greedy. We just want the next best thing, and it has to be, perfect. And I have to sit at home, and the car takes me to work, and I don't have to do anything. And I think that mindset has to change if you go to places where there's really huge need, so that a very small, 70% efficiency is actually very critical, because you're serving a huge population. So if you multiply this fairly low efficiency or accuracy or whatever, you get huge impact. And I think that has to be put in mind. The problem sometimes is that the innovators promise too much, because maybe the funders asking them for a groundbreaking thing. So they come promoting a thing and they say, this is going to be the thing that solves all your problems. And it doesn't. And we've seen some, if I can mention, for example, what happened with IBM Watson. If you know what, you remember this, the fate is basically not that it wasn't working, just that they promised too much, and then people lost faith in this. And of course, in healthcare, we're always very critical. So I think that is important to tell exactly what you can do. If you're adding 20%, say that, and then we can multiply with the population and know the outcome. And even the payers will know what they're buying. Otherwise, if you promise them too much, it comes back to bite you in the foot.
So I think Susanne wanted to...
I think it's interesting, because also I have also a background, as you mentioned, in medical device industry, and I know that it's tricky with these types of products compared to a lot of other products. But I think also we can learn a lot, because why are we so sloppy, so to speak, when in terms of efficiency, or why it works or not with other products? So I think it's also really something that we should discuss between product areas in that sense. I have only one entrepreneur that I'm studying who is doing or dealing with the medical field, so to speak, and she's really disappointed about the collaborations that she's not gaining from traditional hospitals and so on. When she's working in these areas, they are not as interested in her, ideas than when it comes people from the more rich part of the city and ask for money. And that is kind of general for all the entrepreneurs. They have really hard time to finding. And some of them say that we don't talk the language that we should, and so on. And this type of ideas are not viewed as real, ideas. And also the target, the populations that we target are not enough, have not enough money, so it's not as interesting. And just adding to one of the complexities that I see then some of the entrepreneurs have is that when they come out also with their technical solutions, people tend to be really critical. And you can think about first, people, they don't understand new technologies, that's why they're critical. No, they are really, for two reasons, they are really aware of a lot of things that, like new apps or data, how to deal with that. That can also be harmful if it's not treated well. And the other thing is that when you have very little money, then you're very cautious about what to buy and what to spend them on. So I think that's also important.
So I just want to invite Jenny here as well. So we're hearing discussions now about the sort of like partnership situation, how important it is to build something that maybe is continuous and sort of like sustainable in the sense that it actually becomes viable and continuous and going. And I mean, you've been working on Help for many years with your team, and then again also thinking of the empathetic level of sort of like the co-creational and making sure building these relationships and so on. I mean, do you have anything sort of thoughts on that in your experience?
But also, like on the technical side, I mean, being born here and everything, so it actually started out as a crowdfunding platform. So, I mean, speaking of, it's not 100% yet, but it's getting there. So that's how it started, where Malin found her co-founder here, and he built this crowdfunding platform. So then it was really that kind of fundraising, and now it's a huge scholarship program where we have like big partnerships, strategic long-term partnerships with big companies such as Tetra Laval and others. So that's really also a development, and going from something like a small innovation to something bigger. Now it was more technical than empathetic, maybe.
No, but I think that is, I think they connect together, because I think at the end of the day, it is people using the technology, and so it has to make sense that it has to be a value, right, for all the stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
Moving then on a bit to looking maybe at the, I mean, we've been describing, I think we've kept a very positive theme here. I think that's good. I like that. But if we would dive a bit into sort of like discussing maybe challenges or, you know, specific differences that you have noticed in your work and in the different markets that you've been active, you know, where do we see this, as we're describing it, this resource complexity? I mean, where is the toughest nuts to crack, basically? We want to start, I mean, yeah. I don't know if Jenny wants to go, or
yeah, I could start.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when it comes to access to technology for young people, for students, that's where we see it most obviously, I would say. So, I mean, many of the students we meet, they come from very humble environments, and you know, maybe you don't have electricity, and I mean, you don't have a computer in your home, and if there is a computer, it's probably the male family members that get to use it, and not the female. So that's we've been starting to working on that area, and specifically arranging IT boot camps for young women in order to bridge that digital divide and gender divide as well. So we invite female students, both from our scholarship program, but also from other students from the universities, to take part of the IT boot camps in order to learn basic IT, but also to, you know, boost your self-esteem and to get other skills. So I think that's the most evident part of the difference, access to technology, if you compare Swedish students to East African students. Yeah.
I could also just contribute to this to emphasize the importance to understand the underlying infrastructure onto which everything else runs, and that is usually taken for granted. If you are making an app and it needs, you know, these high-speed data transfers, and you are in a place where even getting 2G connectivity is a problem, if you haven't really been there and experienced it, you just think things work, and you know, you just, oh, let's require high resolution images to be sent of, I don't know, a patient or something. And then you go to this place and there's no connectivity, or, you know, people are struggling with charging the devices. And so it is important to understand the context and utilize the technologies that are available and can be accessed by a huge number of users. I'll give an example of one of the projects that we're working on for my postdoc, where we are setting up a patient advice service, and here you have 1177 Vård Guiden, where people can log in on the web, and I understand now you even have to authenticate yourself with bank ID and all that, which is important for security reasons. But if you are going to apply this I remember when I was putting in a grant proposal, I was asked, why are you planning to set up a telephone service? Nobody wants these things. We don't want to call in and get an answer machine, because, you know, why don't you make an app? And I told them, well, where I'm targeting, you know, even people who have smartphones, they are not the fancy iPhones that can, you know. And so we ended up setting up a telephone service that works on interactive voice response, where we know that majority of people are able to speak and listen, can access information in a voice format. They don't need to know how to read, because, you know, reading literacy is also an issue in some cases. And they can call in, and they are patient enough to wait and listen to pre-recorded messages, and that is sufficient, given the severe lack of access to, you know, health information. And that is working well. And, you know, when we're discussing this, even when you're going to publish this, sometimes people think, oh, this is very old technology, we don't see any innovation. But for this context, this is a thing that works. And if you don't consider the available resources and experiences and the people that you're serving, you could just assume and say, oh, let's just make the next app for solving this problem, and it doesn't benefit people. Yeah.
Maybe I can follow up on in terms of funding or long-term commitment, because many of the challenges we have is that you have a very short term money, you try to develop a course or a workshop series or whatever, and there is always this lack of funding. So that's where I would say maybe from a KTH perspective or university perspective, it would be desirable to have some kind of possibility to pilot things. My experience is that you need to be dedicated yourself. So I'll give an example. We do a workshop on nanotechnology, point of care diagnostics in Kenya. We started this off as a goodwill, and we're still in the goodwill. No funding coming our way, and you would see how fantastic discussion goes on between me and the customs when I end up coming to Kenya with everything I need in my luggage. Half an hour later, both parties agree I'm not going to pay, and we thank each other, and I go in, give my lectures, and come back out again. So this is, it takes dedication and enthusiasm. But with very small funding, you could do it in a much more stream way, and more of my colleagues could have the experience and actually luxury to give to a larger students that do not know what nanotechnology is. So what we do is what we would call is key enabling technology in the West, but people growing in certain geographically populations have not been exposed. So to give that opportunity to expose and get their curiosity in order for them to actually, within their own education, adapt this type of technologies is a privilege. And I think long-term commitment from universities, governmental funding agencies, etc., could be a key to make this into a habit, because very few highly motivated are doing this now. But imagine what could happen if we have some kind of base funding where you can actually expose others. Because for me personally, you also get a lot of ideas for your own research. Because as my colleague here was saying, we've been looking at this hammer and spike. You have something and then you look for spikes everywhere. And everything looks like a spike to you. But does it make an impact or not? And I think as researchers, we look for ways to make impact. And one way to make impact is to make technology available to the vast majority. And I think that's where I could see a room for improvement is small base funding to pilot certain ideas and see how where they grow.
Susanne, do you want to add something?
Thank you. Yeah, I can start with commenting on that. I think really this building up this kind of collaborations is crucial. I've seen that also in my studies in Cape Town, where the university actually decided a couple of years ago to place one of their campuses in the township, right in the center of an urban slum, to gain more access to people who could potentially then become more knowledgeable and access to education, but also to research and to other, becoming themselves entrepreneurs. I think, and also we've seen that kind of way of doing it, in offering it and being close, is really a stepstone for a lot of people, and also for companies in the city or more traditional companies getting understanding and access and meeting. So having also that as a meeting point is really, really important, I think. And I just want to comment on because of the technology-wise that there is a difference in how we use technology. That also comes to marketing. I mean, marketing our products in one phase is also important. And I didn't know that there was a Facebook Lite. Did you know that? No, it's a version of Facebook who doesn't take so much or doesn't require so much data. So I mean, also understanding those things, and that's WhatsApp, for instance. It doesn't require as much data as using another social media, etc. And so I mean, these things are also important, and I think they are also important for us. Why don't we use Facebook Lite? We have now building super many plans in Norrland, in north of Sweden, because we need to store all data that we are consuming. So I think this is also interesting.
So we are running out of time. I could keep this conversation going forever. I think
Yeah.
it's super inspiring, and I'm really happy to have you all here. We're going to do a sort of round with everyone here, and there are two things that sort of would like to end with before we open up for some short questions also from the audience here. So the first thing is, in your experience, because I think you've all done successful sort of adoptions and implementations in different ways, what is the factors or like the keys to actually succeeding to at least some moving forward or keeping it going, so the factors for success, so to say. And then also for everyone here today who maybe are thinking about running their own things and their own projects, do you have any advice? Does anyone feel like they would like to start? Otherwise we'll go Raman, and then we can do Susanne, and then we sort of go towards me.
I'll start it. I think I touched upon it a little bit earlier. Passion is very important. If you're passionate about something, you're going to find ways through. Second one maybe is that for young students who are looking for maybe Sub-Saharan African as their marketplace, there's not a good business model yet. So which means you might have to ignore all, if not all, at least majority of the advices you get, and just jump into something that you feel passionate about. We had an experience during the COVID where we developed a COVID test where we thought, okay, we see the trend. In the first months, we understood that Sub-Saharan Africa was going to be left behind, and we were quite accurate on that assumption. So we developed a technology where you can do scale-up testing that would be comparable to PCR. When we started to pitch it, the first question I got was, why don't you start with Sweden? Don't you trust your own technology? So there was a big, but I was now retroactively thinking about it to the young students here. Imagine Sub-Saharan Africa, you have 1.1 billion users. Sweden, we have 10 million. So I think you have to start to think like, if you have a technology or if you have an idea you're passionate about, I think it's a good opportunity to try it. Maybe the traditionally funding schemes might not work out, but in the long term, probably this could be a game change for you and for the community you're serving. So that would be a couple of points. Passionate about what you want to do, and if you want to do something in Sub-Saharan Africa, maybe the traditionally way of doing might not work for you. So together we have to invent or find alternative ways to work.
Thank you. Susanne?
I would like to add to passion. I would like curiosity, because being curious about what actually how things can look like and what could be different and what you can learn from everyone you meet, because you can really learn from everyone. That's really I think that if you have that mindset also, then it also helps you a lot. And also we talked about this understanding the users, etc., but also understanding not only maybe the targeted users, but also things around them. How do they, interact, and how do the community look like? What are the structure? It kind of seem chaotic, but it's not chaotic. It's a lot of structure, but in a very different way. So look with new eyes and be curious, and I think that's really, really important. And then I also, when it comes to funding, is that it is really an issue, and I think also trying to find then colleagues and peers, and you can find them here. I promise you, we are not so many, but we are, and dedicated, and we are willing also to share our learnings.
Thank you. Jenny?
I was also going to say curiosity, actually, so a +1 on that. But yeah, I think it's really, really important that you have an open mind. You're curious to other cultures and ways of doing things, and like not believing that your way is the only way. So that's one of my key points as well: curiosity, and also to don't try to do everything alone. Surround yourself with people who can help you in different ways, and people who are different from you. I mean, try to find someone who is a visionary, some other one who is pragmatic, so you have both doers and thinkers on your team. So I really, really believe in the team effort, and also dare to try and make mistakes. I mean, almost all successful entrepreneurs, they have at least one failure or bankruptcy or something on their CV. So as long as you learn from your experiences and your mistakes, that's I believe in that way too. And yeah, in general, identify people who give you energy, and try to move away from those who steal your energy. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. John Black?
It's interesting that we are discussing innovation and technology, and all the pieces of advice are not about technology, and that is very important. That's really the message that I wanted to add. So on the curiosity and the passion, I want to add empathy, because technologies don't have feelings. People who are going to use the technologies have feelings, and for me that is, I think, something that should be always remembered. It's a social technical affair, and the social part is the most critical. I work with the theory on implementation science called the Consolidated Framework for Implementation Research. And there's a poster behind here, we can discuss that. But what I want to bring out of this is that there's all these many domains that talk about the things that you need to get innovations to succeed. And only one of the 5 is about the innovation itself. And the rest are about the people and the environment. And I think that is something that we have to always remember, that it's about the people. It's not the technology. Even if it works perfect here, you put it in another place and it doesn't work. And I have examples of this. So that is the main message. It's not about the technology. It's about the people.
Thank you so much. Any questions then from the audience before we wrap up? And you will have the chance to talk to the panelists afterwards as well. Yes, we have a question here. I'm coming with the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentations. My name is Aki. The presentations that you gave, it got me thinking about quite a number of things, but essentially about the funding. And I know that at least 3 of you talked about it. And I know that most of the funds or the fundings that come across come from the global north. And we often say necessity is the mother of invention. In the areas that you were talking about where these needs are, there is a necessity. The innovation and inventions are not necessarily coming from those areas. So I was wondering, what do you think accounts for the paucity of funding from the global south in particular, particularly in Africa? So you don't have a lot of funders, putting money where their mouth is, putting resources to sort of innovate, to sort of, bring technology to address most of these key issues. And of course, this is on the back of the fact, as Susanne was saying, massive resources that is available, on the continent that can actually transform things. So from your perspectives, what do you think accounts for this sort of paucity of funders and fundings, from this global south context?
Maybe I can start. Thank you so much for a very, very crucial and important question, actually. So the question really is, if, to give an example, if you have a certain infectious diseases that affect a certain country, that country should mobilize and put resources available to do innovation or research around that topic itself. I think I would like to maybe mention there is a world before and after COVID, because as the COVID happened, the inequality was crystal clear. Each country in Africa was suffering from, okay, we do not have the test, we don't have the vaccine. What's going to happen? So, well, in the global north, we were stacking up to 10 doses. Sub-Saharan African countries were maybe until 2022, maybe 15% coverage. So that was the starting point, I would say. So a lot of countries there have now started to look at the healthcare as a very important, maybe even national security aspect of it. So we start to see funding in terms of capacity building. A lot of sub-Saharan African countries start to look at, hey, how come we do not have our own vaccine development activities in the country? How come we do not have our own health structure built up in a way that we can cope with pandemic, etc.? So thanks God, and luckily the COVID was quite let's say, it could have been much more devastating to Sub-Saharan Africa than what it was. But now we start to see this change, like for instance, this EU project that I'm coordinating called Holy Care. It comes from EC. The program is called Innovative Approaches to Enhance Poverty-Related Disease Research in Sub-Saharan Africa. So there is an emphasis on the research part. So we're not giving a solution to a certain disease and say, hey, here it is, please use it, but rather to capacity building of the research in poverty-related diseases. So what poverty-related diseases have in common is that they disproportionately affect poor countries, but the pharma and the big industries have been not, let's say, motivated enough to develop solutions for those area because the end user cannot pay for it. So now we start to see the change in terms of even capacity building and research. So hopefully the COVID was a bit of a wake-up call for what you're just saying in terms of each country, each region is looking into, okay, if this poverty is disease is affecting only our region, how can we do not collaborate around here to actually do something about it? So most likely we are seeing a shift and a change in the way we look at the global North and global South. We're looking into partnership rather than donor-acceptor relationship. And we will see more and more initiatives coming from Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's what me being optimistic and a research-oriented person see. And I think that's also where we see the new entrepreneurs. Like, for instance, we have this Swish is a very nice example, but M-Pesa was the former of it in Kenya. So we do have innovation that comes from Sub-Saharan Africa that has the potential to transform societies. And where you have the, what you said, your money is on your mouth, I think politicians start to look at it from a survival mode because you cannot be left behind forever. So we start to see this type of partnership. And I think the KTH and Sub-Saharan African countries collaboration is built around that. We're looking at, okay, where are the innovations? Can we get cross-fertilities? Can we learn from each other? And this is where we think the future is very promising rather than pessimistic. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to wrap up because we are running over a bit. It is 1:15. So I will come up on stage again because I want to make sure that you all have time if you need to go to class or something. But you also have the chance, of course, to chat with everyone afterwards. So I do have gifts for you. I will bring them up now. But when I'm fetching them, maybe we can give a round of applause for our excellent panel. Thank you so much.
Nice.
Yes.
I like that helped.
And yeah, as we said, there are posters in the back where you can read more about all the cool stuff that is happening that KTH is doing in Africa in different ways. Research, startups, collaborations. KTH, the Global Development Hub, is also described there. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. Susanne, do you want to say something? Yes. We do have a fika.
Yeah.
Yes, say something about it.
Yes. So at 4:30 today, if you're interested, you come back here and we have a fika, a drop-in fika with Global Development Hub, which is KTH's main mechanism right now for collaborating when it comes to student and student exchange. So if you are interested, please join us then. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Take care.